Right along with the show today. The breaking news that dropped today: Zach Wilson, the new quarterback of the Denver Broncos, traded to the Denver Broncos. It was reported earlier today at around 2 p.m. Eastern Time by Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network. Wilson traded to the Denver Broncos for a seventh round pick swap. The Jets are sending Zach Wilson and pick number 256 to the Denver Broncos for pick number 203 or 207. I've seen some say it's 207, others say it's 203. That'll probably get ironed out. It probably already has. I just haven't checked it. But regardless, it's a late round swap pick in the seventh round. Basically the same pick in the seventh round. So that's what the Denver Broncos are sending them. The New York Jets will also pay some of Zach Wilson's $5.5 million salary. Roughly 5.5 around there. Not too specific on the percentages, the certain amount, but it's around there that the Jets will also be paying some of his salary while he's a Denver Broncos player now. It is crazy to think about. Initially, just you hear the news breaks at 2:30, and I'm thinking, like, wow, Zach Wilson, the number 2 overall pick to the Jets at that time, is now basically on the Broncos, traded to them for a late 7th round pick, and basically the Jets are paying the Broncos in a way for them to take Zach Wilson and to just be on their team and just really just, I don't want to say get rid of him because he has done some good for them coming in, backing up, has shown some great moments. Who knows who their quarterback could have been outside of Zach Wilson. Of course, you think of that, and in hindsight, who could they have gotten at number 2 in 2021? But I don't want to torture Jets fans bringing up those sort of topics. But it is just insane to think of the value that he has dropped from number 2 to a 7th round pick. The Jets basically paying the Broncos to take him is insane. But on the bright side for Zach Wilson, he gets a fresh start in a quarterback room that now really, you don't know who could start out of any of them. It's Jarrett Stidham, Ben DiNucci, and Zach Wilson all in that quarterback room for the Denver Broncos. Not the most star-studded one, I understand that, but it just screams opportunity now for Zach Wilson, who is still only 24 years old. He'll be 25 in August, and in his 3 years in the NFL, yes, they haven't been great. Specifically, he's thrown for over 6,200 yards in 3 years, 23 touchdowns, 25 interceptions, 57% completion percentage. He had a very rough first year, but the team overall wasn't great. It wasn't a great situation for him to be in. But regardless, he played bad. The team was bad. Everything was just not good for the Jets in his first year. But then you saw the Jets start to get better. They started bringing new talent. They brought in Sauce Gardner, Quinnen Williams, these draft picks. Obviously bringing in Aaron Rodgers, drafting Garrett Wilson. The team itself around Zach Wilson got a lot better, and he wasn't projected to start. Obviously last year, it seemed like a good thing, in all honesty, that he was going to learn through Aaron Rodgers for however many years, 5 years, 3 years, 4 years. And then maybe you look at Zach Wilson after learning something from Aaron Rodgers, and you're thinking, maybe this guy could carry on and keep us afloat, keep us relevant with this great talent he has around him. After a few years of learning from one of the best, why couldn't he be thrusted into starting then, which probably should have been the route that they went with once he got drafted, but he was thrown into the fire right away, and you saw how it all didn't pan out at all for them. And unfortunately for Wilson, the rest of the team got better, and he just really didn't get the opportunity, didn't show the same growth as the rest of the team. And last year, or this offseason I should say, Tyrod Taylor was also signed from the New York Giants, and he had a pretty solid season last year, coming in for Daniel Jones and showing some flashes of being a reliable backup. So the writing was pretty much on the wall already with that, bringing in Tyrod. Zach's not going to start or be the second guy over Tyrod Taylor for that veteran experience. So since the NFL owners meeting, General Manager Joe Douglas has been asked about the trade situation with Zach Wilson, and since then there hasn't really been any new updates. He's kept it pretty short on that end, saying that simply he just had no updates to give. There have been talks about it, but nothing had been solidified, and it seemed like it was just going to carry on that way until after the draft, when maybe a team didn't get the quarterback they thought they would, or somebody just needed a better backup or wanted to add depth there. Maybe Zach would have been traded then. And this just came at a big surprise because you look at the Denver Broncos now, sitting at 12. They have been in that quarterback market. You've seen Bo Nix, maybe Michael Penix be mocked there in a few of these mock drafts. And you're thinking, or I thought, discussing it on this show, was that a great situation for any quarterback to go in? How would that be any different from the Zach Wilson scenario that he had with the Jets if the Broncos drafted a quarterback and expected their team to get that much better? They need a lot more pieces, and they don't have a lot of draft picks in this draft, so seeing quarterbacks be mocked there didn't make too much sense to me. And now this seems like the most reliable, valuable option that the Broncos decided to go with. I think before I mentioned Ryan Tannehill as an option. This is just as good for the Denver Broncos in my opinion because I think it works out the best for both of them. I mentioned Zach Wilson has an opportunity now to really start and beat out Jared Stidham and Ben DiNucci if he really has that potential and that hype that was around him back in 2021 when he was drafted out of BYU. If that was all legit and reliable, then he should have no problem beating these two out and being the starting quarterback for the Broncos. It's great for him, but it's also great for the Broncos because now you don't feel the urge, the dying urge of trying to draft a quarterback just because the value, the abilities of these three aren't great. I think now, really, this team, the Broncos, should look and try to look at other teams that want to trade up. Maybe the Eagles, maybe the Bills. They've all been rumored to trading up. The Commanders from the second round. I would start hitting the phone, start seeing what's out there to trade for this pick. What can I get? Because this team needs a lot more quantity and quality, obviously, with these draft picks in the early rounds. Not to mention that if they could stockpile some of those picks in this year's first or second round, maybe next year first, second, or third round, it'll speed up this rebuilding process that they have after the Russell Wilson deal completely collapsed and crippled their organization, their salary cap. I would be looking to get rid of this number 12 or this number 12 overall pick. I just think they need a lot more than they're just going to draft a really good player at 12 most likely, but still need a lot more. And it's going to be a lot longer process to work out and drag along if you just limit yourself to these handful of picks that they have in this year's draft. I'd be looking to trade it now and just see what you have in Zach Wilson. The expectations are already low for this team. It can't get that much worse than it did last year, speaking frankly, in all honesty. So what do you really have to lose with trying out Zach Wilson and seeing what you have in him instead of drafting another quarterback and just ruining him, potentially not supporting him with the pieces around him because you don't have a lot of draft picks. The salary cap's not great. You bring in a quarterback and he only has Cortland Sutton to throw the ball to. The offensive line's all right. Javonte Williams in the backfield is a pretty solid back, but other than that, it's not going to work out great for them, and you're just going to restart this process all over again in 3 years potentially if this quarterback doesn't work out. It seems to me like the obvious decision to just trade this number 12 pick and look to the future. And that way it buys, honestly, Sean Payton some time. If they surprise some people, it looks a little bit better. They get more draft pick, and they're able to convince the fan base a little bit that this is a project that they're really investing into. It'll buy him some time around in Denver, and maybe he could stay a little bit longer. That could also work. And just to look back at that point, this overall point of not drafting a quarterback at 12, reaching for one in a way, you look back to that 2021 draft, now, officially, with this trade of Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence is the only quarterback taken in the first round of that 2021 draft that is still with the team that drafted him. Trey Lance was traded from the 49ers. Justin Fields was traded from the Bears. Mac Jones was traded from the Patriots. And now Zach Wilson was traded from the New York Jets. All drafted inside the top 15. And they're all backups at this moment. Mac Jones is backing up Trevor Lawrence, ironically. Fields is a backup for now. Trey Lance is backing up Dak Prescott. Zach Wilson is the only one that now has a real opportunity, a favorable opportunity, because Justin Fields has an opportunity, but, Russell Wilson is the starter for now. All the other ones probably aren't going to see the field too much at all, or aren't likely to. So, looking at that draft and how only one quarterback is still with the team that drafted him and is still really trying to figure it out a little bit. We've seen great signs from Trevor Lawrence, but I think there's still more people expected more up to this point. So he's still really developing, still trying to get the hang of it. And the rest of them have just failed because these teams honestly just drafted them too early, drafted them with no real support to them. And you don't want that same thing happening if you're the Broncos at 12. And now, to wrap it up a little bit with this Zach Wilson opportunity, to just keep it on a positive note, I think, is he good enough to be the Broncos starter? Is it enough to not draft one or trade up at this point? I've already said it's not logical for me, if I'm the general manager, if I'm the coach, to draft one at 12 and, to say the least, trade up. I think that's just way too much. They're doing way too much with that, and they should trade down instead of up with that. I think if he's good or not, regardless, they're just going to have to stick with it and just buy this out another year with Zach Wilson. If he's good or not, that's just up to whoever's evaluating. It all just depends on the expectations. If you think the Broncos are going to be good this year and Zach Wilson's going to hold you back, I'm sorry to tell you that that's probably not what's going to happen. Not because of Zach Wilson, but because of this team just not being ready, having the skill set right now to be good. With Zach Wilson there, I think it just buys them a little bit of time to invest in other positions, then revisit the quarterback situation down the line, and then I'd be more open to drafting one in the earlier parts of the draft. But officially, Zach Wilson finds a new home. It's a new beginning for him, a new beginning for the Jets in a way as well, because now, after Aaron Rodgers, after being all in on this season, as it looks like, they're going to have to start thinking about quarterback situation as well. So that's maybe in 2 years, 3 years max. So that's something else to look out for. But for now, Zach Wilson, no longer a New York Jet, officially in the quarterback competition to start for the Denver Broncos. That's what just dropped today, the recent news around the NFL dropping on us today from all the insiders that were reporting on it. So we're going to leave it there. That's where it stands right now, in just the big just conundrum of confusion of what's going to happen now. It's certainly going to affect the draft. We're just going to have to wait and see how it happens. But we're going to move on to the last segment. Lastly, talking about some of the new uniforms that dropped from the Broncos today as well, and the Detroit Lions over the weekend into last week. We're going to be back in just a few seconds to talk about those, get my reactions on those, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.